We are off mute.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the August 3rd, 2018 meeting of the DNA Subcommittee. I'm Dr. Adams, and also present are Drs. Bieber, Eastman, and Kidd. In addition, the subcommittee would like to welcome our newest member, Dr. Catherine Gettings, from the Applied Genetics Group, National Institute of Standards and Technology. Welcome, Dr. Gettings. We have a quorum. You've all received a draft agenda for today's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Dr. Eastman. Do I have a second? Thank you, Dr. Kidd. All in favor, signify with the uplifted hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. You've also received a copy of the minutes from the May 11th, 2018 meeting. Are there any questions or comments related to those minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Dr. Kidd, seconded by Dr. Eastman. Thank you. All in favor, signify with the uplifted hand. Okay. It's unanimous. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is for accreditation and laboratory updates. Members of the laboratories are either here or will be available by telephone if there are any questions. The first update is for Erie County Central Police Services Forensic Laboratory.
Mr. Chairman, on pages 1 through 3, there are a number of non-conforming comments on the ISO accreditation, but they don't seem to relate to DNA. Is this something we need to discuss?
No, I don't think so.
I would simply ask the question, why was it sent to us?
The idea is if the DNA subcommittee thought there was a broader issue with regard to these non-conforming issues that may have a collateral impact with other aspects, including DNA work. So in an abundance of caution, they were provided. However, it's within this body's discretion with how they want to handle it.
Okay.
I can make a comment on the quality assurance standard.
Yes.
I'm assuming there were no findings, but I'd like to see a statement in Appendix A saying that there were no findings. I think this might be the first time I've seen that they just left it blank.
Which page are you on, Allison?
I'm on page 104, our page, in red. It doesn't say anything, and I'd like to see a statement in there, and I see it in all the other ones, but for this one I didn't. It's not there. Might be picky, but...
Is there a chance to get them on the phone?
Yes.
I would like to simply ask them how they've addressed these nonconformances and if and how they relate to any of their work in DNA.
Okay.
I do have the contact information for the DNA tech lead. I don't know that he is prepared to answer that. The director was not available today. We can still call him and you can ask, but I don't know that he will be able to answer.
Are we voting on anything relating to this today?
This is informational for Erie County. We could ask for that information for
the next
time.
meeting? Mm-hmm. I'd like to make a motion that we follow up on these nonconformances on pages 1 through 3 of our binder at our next meeting with a chance to speak to the lab director.
Do we need a vote on that, or can we just ask for Erie to follow up with us next meeting?
Yeah, just ask.
Especially as it relates to DNA.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bieber. Anything else regarding Erie County? If not, moving on to Monroe County Crime Laboratory. Any comments or questions?
No.
Can I go back to Erie County? There's another one as well, list of validations, if any, evaluated and improved during this audit.
What page, Allison?
This is going to be 113. It's Appendix E of their QAS. I'd like it to see that there were no say there are no validations reviewed instead of leaving it blank. I don't like to see stuff left blank. So that's just a comment. Okay, that's all.
Back to Monroe. Hearing no comments or questions, do I have a motion to issue a bonding recommendation to the Commission on Forensic Science to renew the New York accreditation of Monroe County Crime Laboratory in the discipline of biology for the time period concurrent with their ANAB accreditation?
So moved.
Dr. Bieber, do I have a second?
A second.
Dr. Eastman? All in favor with the uplifted hand? It's unanimous. Next laboratory update will be the New York State Police. No vote will be required here. It's for informational purposes only. Comments or questions?
I have a question. Mr. Mullen, was this a routine administrative change or an adverse personnel action?
Routine, as I understand it. Yes, Shelley confirms that.
Thank you.
So, yes, it is routine.
Good to hear from the director that it's routine.
It is.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Next will be Westchester County Division of Forensic Sciences. This too is for information only. No vote is required.
So this is the one that had all these errors made on the, I believe it's the quality assurance document. And I think we have in our additional documentation
Yeah, the new
got late has some, if not all, of the corrections done. I just want to comment. I'm just a little shocked that there's so many errors that were done on the document. I mean, it's not the lab's fault, but I mean, it just goes to show good combing through it after they get it back. To find all these errors, I just think I think they need to tighten up a little bit. Not the lab, I'm not talking about the lab, I'm talking about the auditor / assessor. I wonder if they proofread things before they leave the site, or maybe not. I mean, on every one that I go on, they at least meet with the technical leader and go through what they've done to see if there's anything missing, like a missing employee or something like that. And it doesn't look like they did that with this one. And it looks like they also reused a document that had been used for another lab.
Is there a way to address these types of issues with ANAB?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they're aware because they got the thing sent back to them, but this isn't the first time something like this has happened, at least for audits that we've looked at. So, I don't know. I mean, we just voted to have them as the state accrediting group.
We haven't voted yet, have we?
they voted in the commission.
Oh, the
Commission
commission.
did, yes.
The rules and regulations
yeah.
will be coming up
Yeah.
in new business.
Maybe just sending them a letter or something, I don't know. Or just, I know they're aware because they made some of the corrections, if not all of them, but
But it was quite surprising where they mentioned the wrong lab.
Huntsville, right? They-
yeah,
Yeah.
that's FBI, I think. That's an FBI lab there,
Yeah.
so.
Pam said it was going to be at the next commission meeting, and if you'd like, we could invite her also to this body's next meeting.
I think maybe just a very short letter from myself to
just
to ANAB related to this event. It doesn't have to be more than a paragraph, but just noting that we were surprised.
Yeah, because this isn't the first time we've had errors on the documents, and I remember some of the earlier ones were hard to read. They fixed that. The font was very tiny, and a lot of misspelled words, like they weren't proofread. Not on the QAS audit, but on the actual assessment, the ISO 17025 assessment. And it seems like when it became ANAB, or ANAB instead of ASCLD Lab, that I'm noticing it.
I think that's one way we can at least make known our displeasure.
Sounds good to me.
Anything else with Westchester County? Okay, moving on to old business. The next item will be an update on the New York State Partial Match Program from Jerry.
So this is just a statistical summary of activity on the partial match analysis since it began. So during that time period, 92 requests for analysis were requested. 44 resulted where the evaluation could not confirm any basically investigative information. 48 names were released. Of those, 46 of the releases, the cases have been closed. 2 are still open. And as far as activity, the last time a letter was released giving partial match information actually was February of 2015. And the last request for a partial match review or analysis was in May of 2017.
What does closed case mean? Does that mean it's gone to a plea or a trial, or
Could be either. That the police investigative matters related to the request have been closed. Could be there was insufficient evidence to make arrests. I think we have the number of those. We have only one person as a result of the analysis was arrested. So the rest were closed as either insufficient evidence or nothing to proceed with.
what's the time period you're referring to with these 92 requests?
This would go back to, I don't know which month, but 2000, Shelley, what's our begin date on? I believe it's middle of 2015.
Until the present?
Yes,
Only 14.
14. Yes, because we had a letter issued in February of 2015. That was based on a 2014 request.
Yeah.
So there's been but one arrest? of
Yes.
the 92 requests.
Yep.
What was the crime? It was.
That was actually the Bitroff murder case in Suffolk County.
And the 2 open cases, would you say a word about those? Jerry?
What about those as far as we just show them as from the law enforcement agency as still pending cases?
Other questions regarding partial match?
So just from my understanding, can you talk about why there were so many requests in that from mid-2014 to 2017, but the last request was over a year ago? Why is it tailed off, I guess?
I would guess, and this is what I would be doing, is guessing, is of course with the developments in familial searching, which is a more targeted law enforcement request, that would account for it as far as I'm concerned. I don't know, Ray Wickenheiser might have more information on that.
Yeah, really, it's a mathematical game. So as we've increased the loci, as you appreciate, we're only allowing for like one locus mismatch. So if you're going from core 13, it's more likely you'll stumble across that as we go up to the enlarged core. The likelihood of partial matching yielding anything is really going to diminish to 0. So that you're seeing a natural product of that.
Okay, moving on to an update on familial search. Jerry?
So we've had a total of 15 unique applications. Unique being, we had a resubmission on 1, but 15 unique. And we are about to give a training on a result. I can't tell you what the actual result could be. No offender name. All I can tell you is that we're about to give our first training to law enforcement and a DA. We have 1 in process. I believe that if needed, the state police could provide better information on what process they're involved in. Not specific cases, but they're about to begin another familial search process. And we have, I believe, 11 applications total have been approved by the CODIS administrator and by the commissioner. And we're waiting for, we rejected 3 for either the sample was insufficient to meet the policy requirements, or the application didn't contain sufficient information to justify going forward. But we have, I believe, 6 where we're waiting for the memoranda of understanding to be completed. It has to be completed by both the district attorney and the law enforcement agency, so one or the other have signed, but not both. And as I said, one in process.
Questions or comments from the subcommittee? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to new business. Beginning on page 297 is a letter from Commissioner Green requesting the DNA subcommittee review the draft modifications to the New York Code's rules and regulations related to A&AB as the sole entity for accreditation of public forensic laboratories in New York State. The draft modifications have also been included in your binders, If this subcommittee agrees to the draft modifications, then we will issue a binding recommendation to the Commission on Forensic Science to make these amendments. Are there comments or questions related to the draft modifications?
I just have on page 299 in the red page numbers a question. It's section 7. It says, this is just maybe a typo, ISO IEC 17025-2017, and I think it should be colon. And because it's colon for the 218, and I went back and let's see, the other thing was,
And it is further down in that paragraph, a colon.
yeah, it's in a colon, and I went back and I looked at the standards, and it's a colon, or the requirements, and it was something else. Actually, maybe it was a flaw in my software because the font was wacky, but now it looks like it's okay. So I guess that's it for me.
Tell me again where that is on 299.
Section 7,
Okay, I see it. Got it.
line 2.
Yeah.
Allison, is it correct that on the fourth line it says 2018 ANAB ISO, and then at the end it says 2017? In that paragraph you're just talking about. But those
Well,
don't
there
match.
is no
that-
218, it's 217,
Okay.
but I'm not quite sure what the 218
What
is
does that
there
mean
for
there?
then.
I think that's the ANAB program, so it's.
Oh, it's their
the
program.
ISO program and then
But
the
they're using the
ANAB.
217
Okay.
document. Okay.
Okay.
That's all.
There are really no alternatives to ANAP, are there?
There was another lab that was considered during the process, A2L
A2LA.
A2LA, yeah.
was considered. The commission heard presentations from both of those bodies over a period of several months and chose ANAB for a variety of reasons. Lab directors were heard on it, a representative from NICLAC, and each of the accrediting bodies had representatives go to the commission meeting and talk about the pluses and minuses of what they provide.
Any other questions or comments?
Before we vote on this, would it be appropriate for us to review that material?
When you say that material,
That the commission considered in making their recommendation? We're being asked to vote on something we haven't reviewed.
yeah, a modification of the regulations. Not sure what the impact of the relationship between the commission vote adopting, specifying ANAB. It's an interesting question. Does the DNA subcommittee have the power to overrule the commission where they've already adopted and recommended a change in the regulations to enact what they've adopted?
They adopted the DNA requirements, and, that's part of it. So it's,
This though is, I think, more superficial because we had Asclad Lab prior that has now been assumed by NAB. So I think to make the regulations correct, we need to approve these related to that change. If the subcommittee wants to go beyond that in a new business effort, looking at other possibilities, I think we can certainly go in that direction. But I think for today, in this meeting, we need to make those regulations consistent with what is happening.
So if we think something is lacking and it's not can we develop a few extra requirements that are New York State specific instead of having to, just stick to requirements that are part of or that are the requirements of a particular external accrediting organization? I mean, we could impose supplemental requirements if necessary. I'm not saying it would happen, but
Well, given the issues we discussed a few minutes ago, and now we're being asked to put holy water on this, I would like us to revisit the idea of having someone from ANAB come and make a presentation before this subcommittee.
Well, let me just point out one thing, and this goes to what the chairperson raised. The current regulations are citing to an accrediting body that in essence doesn't exist. So many of the requirements for the functioning labs is they have to, the reason for this proposal is just to bring the regulations into conformance with what the labs have been directed to do. So if you were to say, well, we want to put a hold on even the regulatory changes, I would think that would leave the labs in, I'm going to call it a very bad situation.
Understood. However, your commission made the effort to actually interview and vet different groups, hearing testimony from X, Y, and Z, and we are without that opportunity.
And I don't think, let me just make sure I'm not telling you that you shouldn't have the ability to gather more information if you want to rehear from people or ask for more information. I do think that can be separated from a vote on conforming the regulations to the commission action. So, for instance, if you have doubts or you want to see either the written material or ask the bodies to come, the assessors to come in and talk to you, I don't think that's out of bounds. But if you're going to start on this mission all over again, I'm not even sure what your timetable conceivably could be. Because now you'd be saying we want to have ANAB and A2LA to come in and talk to us, to review. There are, of course, videos sometimes or transcripts of the presentations to the commissions that went on over several commission meetings. I'm just saying, keep in mind the practicalities. That's all I'm suggesting.
So from a very superficial point of view, we're asked to approve only those changes that are highlighted here. But if we vote on that, we're not voting to approve the regulations as they are. We're only voting to, whatever they are, make it refer to ANAB.
We're voting on the modifications.
The modifications.
Yes.
Right.
And I think, Dr. Bieber, you're correct. We can go beyond. I think this is necessary today. I think we can go beyond, and in fact, we don't have to do a letter to ANAB. We can have ANAB present at a future meeting to hear our dissatisfaction in what you've pointed out, Dr. Eastman, and whether or not that is adequate going forward.
I'd be comfortable with that.
Then I would like to see if I can get a motion to approve the modifications that we see here, with the one exception of the colon.
I will so move with the understanding it's just the modifications that we are approving.
Do I have a second? Dr. Eastman? All in favor, signify with the uplifted hand. Unanimous.
Let me just close that discussion by also just letting you know, there was a discussion internally, which is still ongoing, as to whether there should be a broader review of regulations dealing with lab accreditation and just all the regulatory structure, which, given the need to conform the regulations to the ANAB issue, legal and the accreditation side, let's defer that and work on that and look at the broader review of what needs to be looked at, because we needed to get this done just to make sure that it conforms to with the paperwork that the labs currently have. So just to let you know that, Fred.
Thank you.
Shelley will have that on a future new business effort. Thank you. Next is our biennial review of the partial match policy. It begins on page 343 with a letter from Acting Director Mullen dated July 16th, 2018. In the letter, he states a review of this policy is required by us every 2 years, and the last review was conducted in 2015, and revisions stemming from that review were approved by the Commission in December 9th, 2016. As such, this policy must be reviewed again during this calendar year. A copy of the current policy is included for review by you, and it begins on page 344. Dr. Beaver?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, for probably for Ray, if he could approach. Ray, on page 344 of our document in red, under section 1B, the crime scene DNA profile derives from a single source and contains at least 10 of the CODIS core loci. You mentioned earlier that there's, as we all know, there's been an expansion in the number of loci that are typed in the newer kits. Have you had a chance to look at what would be the result of those 92 requests had you just looked at the 13 CODIS core loci and had it meet those requirements on 1B? Would you have had a better yield than going to Global Filer, for example?
So maybe I'll just speak to this and then just check with the staff that we have here just to make sure I'm kind of understanding it correctly. So we don't specifically go looking, so to speak. We don't run this program specifically looking for partial matches. As part of our QA assurance, we run the program, look at whether there's essentially coincidental matches or whether there's a one locus mismatch. That's just part of the program that we run as a QA initiative. Originally run to make sure that there was no typos when things were hand done. And then once we found that there were these partial matches, well, would it make sense that perhaps there was a family relationship? So we don't specifically, and we didn't sort of query down to 10. It was now that you have something, you know, here's what the profile might look like, as well as statistically interrogating it. So I'm pretty certain we have it, but I'll verify with the staff that we have sort of gone looking to test it out and essentially go fishing for more partial matches besides the ones that we've actually come across in the QA effort.
When Sylvain Lalonde, formerly employed by the RCMP in Ottawa, did a housekeeping exercise in which they looked for perfect matches, 13 loci within the database, sample against sample, as a housekeeping quality assurance exercise, and they found, of course, that some of the 13 locus matches, sample to sample, were typos, and they corrected those. Some were sets of identical twins, and they found over 100 sets of identical twins, both of whom entered their Canadian CODIS by being ordered to produce a sample after conviction. They then looked at 12 out of 13, 11 out of 13, 10 out of 13, because there could have been also keyboard entry errors there. and they found 25 such cases, and I don't remember the denominator at the moment, but of those 25, 12, 11, 10 out of 13 locus matches, 17 of the 25 were pairs of full SIB brothers. So it's just a question of whether your team has ever considered that type of housekeeping exercises for quality assurance as it relates to the required review of this policy.
Okay, so I guess I'll answer part of it and then defer to the group here to answer more specifically, just because they have the history of being here a lot more years than I have. So with respect to the looking for these familial relationship, and I think that was the big debate over partial matching.
Yeah.
One, we weren't looking for it, but when you now see it, now you won't look the other way, you'll pursue it.
Yeah.
That being the difference between partial matching and familial searching. Familial searching, you have an active
course.
request with the MOU being signed, and you have the request and then you pursue it, as opposed to us just having to come across it. So we haven't gone looking, so to speak. Now I'll defer. Just a matter of who would like to take the question of what we've done. Perhaps Julie, have we actually gone and done additional searching, looking for additional typos, so to speak?
Just for clarification, the partial matches are not done with QC searches. It's during the normal CODA searching that we're doing weekly. Any local lab would get a list of candidate matches, and they could potentially look at a moderate stringency match, determine that it's a no match, where the evidence profile does not exactly match that offender. But that would trigger a partial match evaluation. So it's done during a normal course of a CODA searching. It's not as a result of a QC searching. We did a series of QC searching years ago. I mean, we can discuss, I can discuss with Tom as to whether that's warranted again, but we had done a whole series of them of the state database with a previous state CODIS administrator. With respect to why we haven't seen a lot of partial matches, it's tied to the improvement in the amplification kits where we're looking at more loci, but it's also tied to a change in the CODIS software that does not allow searching for one mismatch anymore. We used to see more because the CODIS software allowed us to search with one mismatch, and they made a change in their searching parameters where it's not allowed to search with one mismatch. And that, combined with the increased number of loci, has led to a drastic decrease in the number of partial matches that we see, partial match candidates that we see.
Will that be true for CODIS version 8, which is due to be released this summer?
Yes.
Do you know?
My knowledge is yes.
CODIS itself has largely precluded finding partial mismatches.
Yes. I mean, well, it's not that they made that change to preclude partial matching. It's just the change that one of the effects is a decrease in the number of partial matching that you're going to see. Yeah. I mean, if you don't allow for one mismatch, you're not going to see as many potential partial matches to be moved forward. You're not going to see those moderate stringency candidate matches being returned.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? This review requires a vote or not?
I believe if there's no need to change anything, there's no need to vote. But you've done the review.
We're not asking for any changes that I've heard so far. We've done the review. I think we've satisfied the requirements then without a vote.
I believe so.
Okay. It's not a new item on the agenda, but it will be for our next meeting. I want to ask Dr. Kidd if he would to present the possibility of bringing something together at our next meeting, and so I thought this might be the best place to have him do that.
As we all know, technology for DNA analysis has undergone dramatic changes. we've all heard about all of these cold cases that are being solved by pedigree, family searching into public databases. But those are using markers other than CODIS. And I've just been at 2 meetings, Gordon Conference on DNA and Forensics and the Green Mountain DNA Committee. A great deal of progress is being made using sequencing and starting to move towards using SNPs for types of information that the standard CODIS markers cannot provide. And my sense is that unless somebody, and I think this committee is the obvious place to start, pushes the commission and through the commission into the individual labs, that they should start becoming familiar with these technologies, because they are likely to become standard in a very, I'd like to think, short period of time, because they're so powerful, but it will take longer than that. And I think we need to begin investigating what progress has been made within the state and evaluate what we as a committee should do to try to move the laboratories forward as the field has been moving forward.
With that said, I know that probably, Ray, we could ask, not here today, but for our next meeting, ask for updates in this regard from you, from the BioTwig group.
I think it would be reasonable. So as a co-chair of NICLAC, I could probably just sort of go through that organization to kind of have the labs as a group speak to that and provide a response from NICLAC as well as the BioTwig, just to say what could and should be done in responding to whatever the DNA subcommittee comes up with. That way we can have like a group consideration and response in addition to any individual labs you might consider as well.
I'd like to ask Ken a question. Ken, are you referring to the ancestry type genealogy searches that are now being done here and there in the U.S., or the so-called phenotype predictions, or both?
I am not specifically referring to either of those, but rather to the fact that the methodologies are moving forward that can allow some of that. I think they need to be evaluated, and the labs need to be familiar with it. I think family searching can be much more powerful with some of the DNA markers, because very large numbers can be multiplexed in sequencing, far exceeding what the CODIS markers can give. So there are many different things. I think any one application, I am not a great supporter of facial prediction. That's almost magic in terms of what is being done by the companies. But certainly a lot of other things can be done very powerfully.
Then I have a question for Ray while he's still at the table. In some states, I'm hearing through my grapevine that individual law enforcement agencies or sheriffs are deciding on their own to send crime scene evidence to Company X, I won't name them, the company, instead of taking the sample to the evidence room in their local crime lab, whether it's state police, county sheriff's office, medical examiner, et cetera, what is the situation in New York State? Can any police officer sworn or deputized go to these companies on their own, or are they required to go through the evidence receipt room in Monroe County or Erie County or Albany, for example?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I'll just give you what I feel my understanding is. So certainly, when you look at who has ownership of that evidence, if it's a local jurisdiction, someone who does have a crime lab, the expectation is that's the expertise that is provided. Many agencies do not have a crime lab, submit to crime labs as a customer, so to speak. Well, they own that crime scene sample. It's a discard sample, and they have the opportunity to use any lab at their discretion. Now, within the state, my understanding is that there's a requirement that when DNA is used for identification, it does have to have the oversight of the commission, including the DNA subcommittee. So that is my understanding, that as a matter of policy, that it needs to be an accredited, approved lab, approved by your body and the commission for identification.
There's an added requirement that any sample from New York has to go to a New York State Department of Health certified lab. So that would go through the forensic identity. They have to be follow their standards and requirements. They have to be proficiency tested and all that. So there's only, for New York, there's only, I believe, 2 labs that are currently certified, private labs that are certified by the Department of Health. I think one is Bodie, and I think the other one might be DNA
Solutions.
Diagnostics.
DNA Solutions in Oklahoma is also accredited by
Oh, okay, so
New
maybe
York.
there's 3. I know there's a very small number of labs that they can do.
So not to trivialize this, so the chief of police of SUNY Plattsburgh can't take a rape kit from the student health office and send it directly to Parabon, for example.
So if, let's just say that if that particular entity was one of these approved and decided to become approved, then the answer is yes, they could. If any one of those 3 providers decided to offer this additional service and it fell under their accreditation, then yes, they could. That's my understanding.
I think this is a big topic for Department of Health right now, from some of the things I've heard, because of what has happened with the ancestry.
Well, that underscores Dr. Kidd's recommendation, because hither and yon, outside of the Empire State, things are happening in a different way, right? Because
Yes,
the local constabulary may be facing delays, or they may face frustrations, and they may be going directly to the company or companies without taking the evidence through an evidence room and having other analyses done that might be appropriate and so on.
That's their decision.
Yeah, of course.
They own the evidence, so to speak. They developed the crime scene, and it's within their purview that they can send it to any entity, including a private lab, who could be offering the service.
So Dr. Ann Walsh is on the commission. She's still on the commission, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
She's the director of the Forensic Identity Unit of the Department of Health. So she would be, it'd be great to get her input of what's going on with that. I'm sure they're focusing a lot on it, getting a lot of requests. And
Well, Dr. Kidd, thank you for
Yeah.
bringing this to the forefront, and we will move in that direction for Jerry, Shelley, for our next meeting, looking at input from those that can provide the best input.
And we'll also provide a summary of this discussion to the commission, so that they're familiar with the interests that you've expressed.
Can I ask a question? What are the repercussions if an agency did send samples? Would it not be admissible in court, or what would be the actual repercussions?
I don't know.
Okay, because a lot of this is being generated as information, investigative leads, right? That is not going to be entered into court. It's ancestry information or phenotype that would be a part of the overall investigation, but not necessarily. And so that brings into question, do they need to be validated procedures? Does it need to be an accredited laboratory if they're not issuing reports that are going to be accepted in court? So that's another part of it.
Yeah, you're stepping into, of course, as you know, in the legal arena, you've just defined the gray area. What analysis at some other site, even if in direct violation of the DNA requirements as to where DNA analysis and identification evidence can be produced, if it's used in a link in the chain, which leads the police agency to go out and interview a murderer who then confesses and then they get videotapes, what would the consequence be? Number one, would it be suppressible? You can't use it. Number two, if that item, as far as identification evidence, was suppressible, is anything following from it? Those are all so case-dependent, fact-specific, that all you can say is that if a law enforcement agency, as they always do, if they're choosing to engage in a risk investigative step, they're going to just have to do those kind of evaluations when they're making those kind of choices. You couldn't really definitively answer, can you use it, can you not, is it going to lead to other things being suppressed? You couldn't answer that question without knowing the specifics.
Interesting, yeah. Thank you. We'll move on now to the laboratory disclosures. There are no votes required as we look at this information for information only. Again, we have members of the laboratory available, either present or by phone, if there are questions. And we'll begin with Nassau County Division of Forensic Services. Any questions for Nassau? We can get them on the phone if necessary.
Nassau's
Oh,
here.
I'm sorry.
Nassau's here. I have a sticky note here. I think I probably asked you these questions the last time.
This is the training issue, eh?
Sperm identification?
Is the problem, from your point of view, can you help me understand from 500 feet, was the problem with the trainees or the training?
I think the true root cause of it was that we took the training program out of order, which we generally don't do. So these trainees did not have as much experience as they normally would when they would be looking at these sperm searches. Before this, we required 6 months that they would be witnessed by a competent analyst when they were doing sperm searches. So because their training program was taken out of order, they were released after 6 months, but they didn't have as much time with looking at kits and other things that they would have had we taken the training program in order. Overall, we looked at a little over 100 cases. So there were 11 identified that had issues. And
these are ones that
the majority of the time, their answers were correct. If you look at the information that was provided to you, the majority of these were where they were looking at one sperm, and that's where there was some misidentification.
So they were missing sperm, or they were identifying, calling positives when there were no sperm present?
Yep.
So how was that found out? Just that there was no DNA profile, or?
Supervisor was tech reviewing, and there was a case that didn't have a DNA profile, and there was sperm seen, so she wanted to reach out.
So
that's how we discovered
did any
it.
cases go out?
So we had 6 amended reports issued. Of those 6 amended reports, the conclusions were changed from semen was identified to semen was presumptively found. Because if we don't find sperm, we do P30. So in all 6 of those cases, the P30 was positive. So that was the overall result. And then the other cases had not gone out yet.
Do you have any understanding of what it was that they saw on the slide that they thought was
Yeah, we had the
medical?
supervisors, go back and look with them. Some of them, with more experience, looked and right away said, I don't think that I would have made the same conclusion. One of the analysts seemed morphology-wise that she wasn't quite where she should be. But yeah, the supervisors went back with them and looked at these, all these cases. And the 11, they went back, and that's what we found.
Have you reverted back now to a standard training process versus?
We have a new trainee. We will not take trainees out of order anymore. These 4 analysts are still required to be witness because we also changed. We found a problem with our protocol and the way we define when they would be released from that witness in the sperm search. It really wasn't clear. So it didn't say what part of the training. Was it when they completed the sperm search module, 6 months from there? When they completed the sperm search and the differential, 6 months from there? So it really wasn't quite clear. So we've made it once they are interpreting analysts, so they have completely finished the training program, they will be required to be witnessed a year from that point. So these analysts are still being witnessed, and the supervisors that are reviewing them report that there are not discrepancies, there are no issues, they feel confident, and the analysts report the
So
same.
in their training, though, are they just looking at real casework, or are they getting some lab prepped slides, maybe some more challenging, and you actually know what's on those slides, and do they get tested against those?
Yes, they get lab prep slides, they get competency tests, but it's not as much as an analyst would see while they're doing sexual assault kits or doing differentials and having that witness for the positive identifications. They just don't get the same level of experience. And this has always been our procedure, but wasn't a problem until now because we took the training program out of order and they just didn't have as much experience.
Dr. Bieber?
Is it practical to have a digital camera attached to the scope to document the presence of a sperm head, mid-piece, or tail when seen, or is that not a useful exercise to consider?
We generally don't take digital photos of all the
If you have good
sperm
scopes, you can do the
searches.
XY coordinates
Yeah.
and find it
Right.
again.
Right.
So just stick that in the notes or something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now I have one more, so I may as well sit if you have questions. They have another one? Yeah.
Anything else for NASA?
Oh, I have another question.
Sure.
You have these, still under yours, right? Yeah. You have these tables, and these are results of looking at smears, I think, and slides.
Yeah, this was the 11 cases that had issue.
So, now I lost my spot here. It looks like on here, negative results, there's no witness. If you have sperm negative, nobody comes back and rechecks those slides to make sure they're
Well,
negative?
so it's dependent. If they were kit smears, another analyst might have looked at that kit. So if you see the witness as NA, that's because another analyst had probably looked at that kit. But if they're sperm negative, they don't require a witness because we also have a P30 that we do if something's sperm negative. Our sperm search is not meant to be a long search, all-inclusive, and if it's negative, it moves forward to P30.
Okay, so for your P30s that were sperm negative P30, when you go on and do DNA, does the male profile end up in the sperm fraction?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at that, not all of them, not
But-
everything P30 positive. I mean, it's based upon when the incident was, what the concentration of sperm was. I mean, labs do have cases that are P30
Or some
positive,
of them-
that there's not a
Just
semen donor
vasectomized or-
identified.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
but, the supervisor is always looking, based upon even ratio of male to female, and, you know, that's probably another thing that flagged the supervisor, not just sperm or semen, but, you know, male to female ratio. They look at all these things inclusively to determine if somebody needs to go back and take a look at something.
Other questions?
There's another issue on page 358 in red. That's your lab as well, the CPI?
Yes.
Could you say a word about that, please? How was it discovered that the software upgrade didn't include Theta?
It was discovered by one of the supervisors.
In doing a tech review, or?
The
Yeah.
CODIS administrator, yes.
Yeah.
And on these, you sent out amended reports. What was the impact?
I think you have that, and you should have it on
Page
the
362 has it.
362,
Yeah,
I
there's 4
see the
cases.
change in the stats. Did that, in the calculation, there wasn't any, I mean, did you have any other fallout from that, or?
No, some of the cases were closed. I think there was one that was still active. I have to look it up. But no, there was, and after both these incidents, we notified the DA's office and the police department of the cases and the case report numbers and all the information. And they get notified initially. But from either, there's been no negative impact.
Okay, thank you. Next will be Suffolk County Crime Lab. And there was additional information sent out on Suffolk County. Late information.
I think I have a question. There's nobody here.
Nope, I will call.
What page will you be on, Dr. Eastman?
I opened up the supplemental,
Oh, okay.
and I just have a, can't find my question, but
Crime Laboratory, Diane.
Hi, Diane. This is Shelley Palmer with the DNA Subcommittee. They have a few questions.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, this is Allison Eastman.
Good morning.
Good morning. I just, according to the thing here, there was a level 1 correction. There was one item of evidence impacted.
That's correct.
And was it a probative item?
In this particular case, there were other items of evidence that were probative. So again, this was one of 18 items submitted within the case. It was not the only item of evidence.
Okay, and so there was just one item of evidence affected by this?
Correct.
No other?
This is, again, a walk-in refrigerator where the evidence is stored waiting analysis, so this is a longer-term storage, and there were other items of evidence associated with the case also within the walk-in, and it was only this one item.
Oh, okay. And it's all fixed now?
Yes. The repair was completed on July 24th. We did some monitoring, both by a hemostat and also physical evidence. We were more than familiar with them. There is an issue that the manila envelopes, the gum flaps, were actually sticking. We put some in there, and I'm happy to report that they were bone dry.
Oh, good. That was all my question. That was it.
Other questions for Suffolk County?
I just have one follow-up. This is Catherine Gettings. So how do you know that other items weren't affected? I assume there were a lot of other items in the refrigerator that maybe, did you do a visual inspection of the outside of the items?
Absolutely. All of the exterior packaging was examined. There was no, and again, during the entire course of this, there was never any mold or any kind of staining from mold indicated on the outside of the packaging. Since to date, there has been no incident of any other report of mold on any of the other items within the vault. And again, items aren't normally stored in there for that extended long period of time. We're usually talking maximum maybe 6-8 months.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank
The
you,
next,
Diane.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
the next item on the agenda is executive session. Can I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to a current investigation or matters that may lead to the appointment, promotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person?
So moved.
Dr. Beaver, do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Kidd, all in favor, signify with the uplifted hand.
You're good?
Record that. Record that.
Okay. I'd like to go back on the record and report that no action was taken in executive session. The next meeting of the DNA Subcommittee will be November 2nd, 2018 in New York City. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Dr. Kidd, do I have a second? Dr. Eastman, all in favor? Unanimous? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good trip back.
We're actually going on to